Welcome to A Plus News. Today we are joined by Cattle Australia's Chief Executive, Dr. Chris Parker, to talk about Buffel grass. Chris, could you tell us a little bit about the issue and why it is such a hot topic at the moment?
Well, g'day Natasha, and g'day to your viewers. Really great to be with you. I think the issue around buffel grass is something that we've been watching for a little while. We do have quite a strong push from some environmental groups to list buffel grass as a weed of national significance. Pretty much flawed ideology, you know. I mean, it's pretty hard to be comparing something that is vital, particularly for the northern cattle industry, and supports beef production for this country, and put it in the same class as something like lantana or blackberries or something like that. Honestly, Natasha, you sometimes look at what some people focus on, and really for a significant pasture species that has significant benefit to agriculture like buffel grass, this is really flawed ideologies about the nicest thing I could say about it.
Yeah, and look, obviously very important to that northern cattle industry, as you've mentioned, but outside of that space, in other areas, it can be a problem. Is there room to maybe do a classification just, where it's not so vital? Is that being looked at as well?
Well, I think what we need to be looking at is ensuring that these processes that the governments want to run, we have the ability to be able to put forward the arguments around the value of particular plants in this case. I think at times we see in these processes that all the voices aren't being heard appropriately. And if we look at what's happened with Buffel in particularly Northern Territory, I know because I was speaking to them last week at the NTCA, they had some serious concerns with the process that was run up there and the manner in which the concerns of particularly agricultural sectors are taken into account with some of these environmental issues. Natasha, let's not forget, the red meat industry, in particular the grass-fed cattle industry, is actually stewards of 50% of the landmass of Australia.
Amazing.
We spend, as a group, $5.3 billion on weed control. You would think, and that is a breadth of knowledge that people would be burning to get hold of and to understand the perspectives. And I think that when you look at the way this land has been managed for many years, and you talk to the people who are actually managing the land, they wouldn't say it's a weed, they'd say it's a valuable resource. And that's the message that we need to be ensuring government hears. And we've recently done some press, and I noticed Senator Canavan asked some questions in Senate estimates of the appropriate departmental officials as well. So we need everyone on this bandwagon. Fantastic that AgForce has been doing some work in this space. Northern Territory Cattlemen's Association as well. This is an important resource. We let this sort of thing get through, and who knows what's next.
Absolutely. And then for those who aren't aware about buffel grass, so we obviously hear a lot about it and the benefits of it through our property stories we write constantly. Any northern properties, it's something that's really hammered home as a key asset in properties. But for those in the southern states, could you maybe just give me a little bit more information about why it's so important and why other feed sources potentially wouldn't fill its place?
Well, it's actually not a native of Australia. It's originally a native of Africa and India. Best that we could see, I think it was probably introduced by the Afghan cameleers. But there are certainly stories of folk who are actually been seeding buffel grass, and in fact, it was seen as a very useful pasture species. It's particularly drought tolerant. It has significant benefits for holding country together during dry periods as well. So it as well as being a very good cattle feed and underpinning sections of the northern industry, it has those environmental effects of being able to hold country together and to be able to be an extremely drought-tolerant species as well. So, it fills a niche, and yes, it's become an integral part of grazing operations for a large number of properties, as you pointed out just before.
Absolutely. Now, just to finish up, the federal election, the much anticipated federal election has finally been announced this morning. I just wanted to know if you had some information for the cattle producers who are watching, or anything you'd like them to be watching, any key issues in the lead up to the election.
Well, I think there's probably a number of key issues, and the environmental issues around sustainable land management, and particularly around some of the challenge we're facing from environmental NGOs around our or deforestation-free credentials, I think, is one we'll need to keep the pressure on during the campaign, and also on any new government that comes into play at the end of that campaign. One of the other things is the manner in which biogenic methane, or methane from cattle, is accounted for. I think, what we would contend and have done for some time is that is not being measured appropriately, Natasha, and that really concerns us, that the effects of that have been overestimated in the national accounts, and we want to see that rectified. Clearly, cattle produce methane, but cattle don't make carbon. The methane that they produce is absorbed by grass. They eat the grass, and that's where the carbon is, part of the natural carbon cycle. And I recognise that methane, clearly is a gas that has a stronger heating effect than CO2, but we need to have that appropriately accounted for. Very different, Natasha, biogenic methane produced from cattle than digging up coal and burning and getting CO2, which is adding carbon to the atmosphere. That was in a lovely carbon store in coal, and is now saying it doesn't have benefits, and I'm not an anti-coal person or anything like that, but I just think there is very much a difference in the way those things are accounted for. And I suppose finally the thing that we think is important, not just for the northern cattle industry, but for the cattle industry more broadly, is around support for the live cattle trade. We've seen what happened in particularly the effects in Western Australia, although it's an Australia-wide ban in sheep, and we'll be pushing very, very, very hard on that issue. And one issue in particular that we'd like, whichever government comes into play at the end of the election, is to renew the red meat partnership with Indonesia, a vital partner of ours, both for box meat and live cattle. And that finished in 2024 and wasn't renewed. We think that that particular partnership has significant benefits. I think particularly, Natasha, given that the new president, well, he's not quite new, what's he, nearly 12 months, in Indonesia, is very strong on food security, very strong on lifting the socioeconomic part of his country, and ensuring that food and food security forms a very important part of that. And of course, the Australian cattle industry has a vital role to play in food security around the world. We export 70% of what we produce, and we're a multi-billion-dollar industry. This is something I think sometimes on our farms we forget how big we are, and how important we are, and that's something we continue to push with government, and we'll be pushing during the election campaign to make sure that the voice of our producers, our 52,000 levy payers, is heard.
Absolutely. And sorry, I will just add one quick question at the end too. You mentioned new presidents and our export markets and how important and vital they are. Obviously, the industry is just waiting at the moment to see what's going to happen with tariffs in the US. Have you got any sort of messages to cattle producers this weekend, watching this and thinking about what's going to happen?
Well, I think it's important to recognise we don't have any tariffs at the moment. It's also important to recognise that Australia has a significant trade deficit with the US. We're only one of 3 countries in the world that exports less than what the US exports to it. All of that, I think, positions Australia extremely well in any discussion in Washington. And also the majority of certainly the beef exports out of this country are complementary to the US system, in the sense that we're putting in lean trim. And I'm sure your listeners are well aware, and your watchers are very well aware of that particular fact, which in fact has benefits to US producers, because they're not having to grind, if you like, lean meat that they would normally sell as a high-end cut. So, the government has been very supportive and has kept the industry pretty well informed. But who knows what President Trump might do? I suspect not many people know what President Trump might do. But certainly we're expecting announcements on a range of countries on the 2nd, whether that includes Australia, whether that includes beef. I don't think it's particularly helpful to speculate at this stage. But suffice to say, I'll be in the US next week, both for the Global Roundtable on Sustainable Beef, which we are a board member on and participate in. And then I'll go on to Washington to meet with our trade officials and the head of mission, the ambassador there, and also meet with the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, who have been quite vocal in this area, and just reminding them of some of those facts coming out of our beef industry here.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today, Chris. We really appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Lovely to speak with you. See ya.